When corrupt cops step into a courtroom, their confidence often crumbles under the weight of their own actions. Here are instances where such tyrants were called out, exposed, and held accountable.
Are you paying on now?
Yes, my friend Melissa, so she's going to get a hold of her friend Joe.
Okay, well, put it this way. You got about less than 5 minutes for her to make that decision. If not, I'm going to end up probably impounding your car and you can go to his house, okay?
Oh my God, please.
Alright?
She said he's an awesome minister.
Did you put your pants on? Where did you put your pants on?
Please tell me right now. Melissa said he was.
I don't know. Are you going to put your...
God.
Do you have a problem with me looking in the car to make sure there's no marijuana so I can smell it? Can I look in your car and make sure there's no marijuana?
Oh my God, you can look in this car. I am a nurse.
Okay.
There's nothing
Can you do me a favor? Stand right about here for me? Where my light is?
Yes.
Can you stand or can you not? You were going to be putting them on a couple minutes ago, so...
No, I had a skirt on.
What this officer does next will be the biggest red flag you'll ever see. It also gives us an idea of what this horrible officer plans to do later that night.
I don't know what's in this car, but I was driving. He was driving. I was driving.
Your skirt is in the car? I do not see you.
I'm lying. I don't either. What did he say?
Okay. Do me a favor. Come on, stand out here for me, alright, Melissa?
Look.
You don't want to kick that shoe. There you go. That'd probably be better. Here, I'll throw your shoe on the floor for you.
Yeah.
You can just leave that there. That's fine. Do me a favor. Hang on.
Ex-husband.
Hang on, right there in the corner of the car for me, okay?
That's okay.
That's alright. There's no reason for you to be sorry. I heard you.
Hold it for my son.
If I bring you a highly intoxicated chick, did you drop her off in the hotel for me so she can get a hotel room?
The way this officer is so comfortable doing all this tells me that his intentions are not right whatsoever.
This dude picked this chick up in the bar, okay? She's just slam wasted. He's a 179, so he's going. But she doesn't want to go to his house.
I'm sorry, sir.
Okay. Alright. Come on with me. Come on, Melissa. I need you to hop out.
Yes, sir. Let me get my stuff.
You got everything?
Yes, all food.
Alright.
Right here. Where's your makeup?
It's right next to you. Right there.
Okay, here it is, sir. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
That's okay. I know, you even misplaced it. Come on with me. I know. You'll get it straightened out. You'll get it straightened out. I need you to come with me, Melissa.
I know you need me to get out of this car right now.
I know you.
I'm going to you right now.
This is the first time I've ever seen a cop take a drunk person to a hotel instead of just calling a relative. This is not normal, and everybody in the courtroom knows it.
Hold on my cigarette. I'm stuck in you right now.
I'll get you.
I'm sorry, I'm calling you.
That's okay.
It's a volunteer officer.
Tell me what your first recall is after leaving Captain Lou's.
It's so hard to remember because everything is so blurry and being on the side of the road.
You do remember that?
Very, very vaguely, yes.
Lay down in one of the beds that was in that room.
Yes.
Okay.
The stupidity of such cops that they think they can get away with their horrible acts baffles me, especially when there are cameras right there.
And do you remember doing that, or?
No.
Okay. Did there come a point in time, or do you have any memory of the officer returning to the hotel room?
No.
Okay. When is your next memory of seeing the officer there in the hotel room, if at all?
The next memory I have is he was on top of me. having intercourse.
She didn't even remember what happened, and that's all I need to convince me that this disgusting cop took advantage of her. We bring you this next footage from July 17, 2017, when Officer Fritz was eventually sentenced.
And sir, you are Eric Fritz?
Yes, Your Honor.
And you're here today with your attorney, Mr. Grable. Have you had a full and complete opportunity to consult with him?
Yes, Your Honor.
And you understand that you face today a possible maximum penalty of 15 years in prison?
Yes, Your Honor.
And are you ready for sentencing?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
As a police officer who took an oath to protect and serve the community, what you did to me was wrong. You raped me. You knew I was highly intoxicated, yet you used that as a selfish opportunity. My life has been forever changed. Every aspect of my life has been affected. My children have struggled. My friends, family, and loved ones have watched me through a year of hell. I can't see a police vehicle without feeling fear or be reminded of what happened. I made a poor decision to have too many drinks, putting myself in a vulnerable position. I don't remember leaving the bar that night, but my friends had arranged for another person to drive my car as I was far too intoxicated. I had no idea the driver was also intoxicated and would get pulled over by a police officer.
The court footage transitions to Captain Eric Fritz now explaining himself, but there is no way he can weave his web of lies to free himself of guilt. He committed an absolutely heinous crime, and justice is now inevitable.
Mr. Fritz, anything you wish to tell me?
Yes, Your Honor. First, I'd like to apologize to my friends and family who I've actually let down. I'd also like to apologize for my coworkers who I embarrassed by my decisions. I'd also like to apologize to the people of Courtroom Township for my actions that night. And I absolutely would like to apologize for Ms. McMillan for my horrific decision of offering her a hotel room. I never should offer her a hotel room in the first place. It never should happen. I never should put her in that situation.
Thank you, sir.
However, this righteous judge isn't going to stand for Fritz's nonsense.
You took a law enforcement oath of honor to protect and to serve and to uphold the highest of ethical standards. Instead, you preyed upon and exploited and damaged a woman who was entirely helpless due to excessive intoxication. Even more disturbing to this court is the fact that you used your badge and the authority and power it grants you as a means to implement your criminality. You betrayed her, you betrayed your fellow officers, you betrayed mightily the public trust all of us had.
The following is an interview of the victim's daughter talking about the sentence received by the officer.
You know, there's a family behind here, an unfair, it's a year and 5 probation. It's not going to compare to what my mom has gone through, what our family has gone through, what we've lost in a year. We've bonded in a year, we've gotten closer, but I'm thankful that they took this seriously and that what needed to get done got done. It's out there, and he's not going to be a police officer anymore.
Eric Fritz was sentenced Monday to 1 year in jail with credit for 1 day served and 5 years probation in Van Buren County Court. Fritz pleaded no contest to 1 count of unlawful imprisonment after originally being charged with assault and kidnapping. However, if you thought this cop was bad, the crime this next cop committed will leave you in tears.
Get down! Get down!
On April 20, 2021, Micaiah Bryant, a 16-year-old girl, was fatally shot by police officer Nicholas Reardon in southeast Columbus, Ohio. The following footage is of the authority addressing the incident in a public conference.
90 seconds after shots were fired, the fire alarm notice was notified that we needed a medic at that scene. 6 minutes after fired, a Madison Township medic arrived at scene and performed life-saving measures to include transport to Mount Carmel East Hospital. Are we ready with the 911 calls? We'll first play the first 911 calls so you have that information.
911, where is your emergency?
Hello? It's 3171. Leave your way.
Is there an apartment number or letter? What's going on?
Come up here. The
Ma'am, you need
address
to talk to me.
is 3171. We got MC's grown girls over here trying to fight us, trying to stop us, trying to put our hands on our grandma. Get here now.
Have you seen any weapons? Ma'am, do you see any weapons?
We need a police officer here now.
Do you see any weapons?
Police officer now.
Ma'am, do you see any weapons?
On the dog trying to hear us. No!
The chief then plays another recording of yet another 911 call.
911, what's the address of your emergency?
It's on Legion Lane.
What's the emergency there?
Oh, well, never mind. The police are already out here. Never mind. Thank you.
Again, those were the only two 911 calls we received, and we did not receive any 645, 459 emergency line calls.
The chief now shows important body cam footage from the tragic incident, and with that, all Nicholas's hopes will be shattered.
The first video we're going to show you is from Officer Nicholas Reardon. Officer Reardon was working a one-officer car. He was hired in December of 2019. He's currently assigned to Zone 2, second shift, and he is the officer that discharged his firearm.
Hey! What's going on? Hey, what's going on? Hey! 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 Get down! Get down! Get down! Get down!
No! You ain't shoot my baby! You shot my baby!
What cop starts shooting prematurely without assessing the situation? Either an untrained one or an officer who's out looking for blood.
She shot!
Back up.
Is she shot?
She just went at her.
She's a kid, man! Damn, are you stupid?
And the situation is really confusing, but all will soon become clear as the case goes on.
Micaiah Bryant has been positively identified as the 16-year-old in this incident, and law enforcement has been in contact with her family. As I said last night, the important step now is for BCI to conduct a independent and transparent investigation. The Columbus Division of Police will assist them, but we will not interfere in any investigative process that they have. Our role is to provide them the information that they request and do so in a timely manner. We will not interfere. We will not provide input. We will allow them to conduct their investigation. At the conclusion of their investigation, that investigation is sent to the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office, where it will be presented to a Franklin County grand jury, and eventually the packet will come to the Columbus Division of Police, and we will review that incident for policy compliance or violations.
The mayor now comes onto the podium to talk about the horrific incident. The horrific incident that shouldn't have happened, had no reason for happening, and the one which cost a child their precious life.
We don't yet have all of the facts, but we do know that a 16-year-old girl, child in this community, tragically died last night. We released the officer's body-worn camera footage as soon as possible. We'll release all other information that we can as soon as we can. We also need to be careful about not compromising the investigation being conducted by BCI. We believe that transparency with the public is the utmost priority during this difficult time. Bottom line, did Micaiah Bryant need to die yesterday?
The officer better pay for his actions. A child who had barely seen life lost her life due to the lack of composure displayed by the officer.
This is a failure on part of our community. Some are guilty, but all of us are responsible. BCI will determine if the officer involved was wrong. And if he was, we will hold him accountable, as we have other officers who've committed wrongdoing, criminally, or in violation of the policies and procedures of the Division of Police. Transparency, accountability, absolutely critical to our community during this time of crisis. We have a bigger societal question. How do we as a city and a community come together to ensure that our kids never feel the need to resort to violence as a means of solving disputes or in order to protect themselves? We remain committed to ensuring accountability in all violent interactions.
The mayor goes to further emphasize how important they think transparency to the public is, and I couldn't agree more. This is the best way to save any other future children. Such mistakes cannot be afforded.
The BCI investigation is the first step in unraveling what led to the tragic death of yet another child in our community. This is what we have done thus far. We released officer-involved body-worn camera footage within hours of the incident. We updated stakeholders throughout the evening of the incident. We are releasing remaining body-worn camera footage from witness officers here this afternoon. We will release cruiser cam video either later today or early tomorrow morning. We continue to meet with faith leaders, community leaders, and the media to share everything we can without compromising the investigation, because we know how critical timely, full, transparent information is to the public right now. I invite Safety Director Pettis to come forward and share a few words.
Thank you, Mayor. I understand the outrage and emotion around this incident. A teenage girl is dead. And she's dead at the hands of a police officer. Under any circumstances, that is a horrendous tragedy. But the video shows that there is more to this. It requires us to pause, take a close look at the sequence of events.
After the mayor's speech is over, the safety director comes on and shares a few words.
I think we all knew as a city and as a community that there were a lot of things being said and shared out in the community that may or may not have been consistent with what we have seen with our own eyes here. And I think critically during a time of crisis, it's very important to be as transparent and responsive as possible. And so work closely with the director and the chief to make sure, and their teams, to make sure we got this footage out. Now you have everything that we have that has been processed, and we'll be sharing more in the hours, days, weeks ahead. That doesn't compromise the investigation, because it's critically important for us.
Next, an officer caught abusing his authority learned his lesson when a relentless prosecutor exposed his every lie.
The thing I will ask you to do is to state your first and last names for the record and spell each.
My first name is Jeremy, spelled Jeremy. My last name is Phillips, Philipps.
And Mr. Floyd didn't drop dead while you were interacting with him, correct? You testified that you were the officer who approached the passenger side of the vehicle.
The only way I can make sense of the sentencing, and I also want everyone to understand where I'm coming from with regards to this, especially if there's going to be any appellate review of this sentence.
What happens when suspects get charged in court? What happens when these suspects turn out to be cops? These are cases where corrupt cops instantly get destroyed in courtrooms.
The thing I will ask you to do is to state your first and last names for the record and spell each.
My first name is Jeremy, spelled Jeremy. My last name is Phillips, Philipps.
Thank you. Go ahead, your witness.
Thank you. How are you employed, sir?
I'm employed with the City of Waukesha Police Department.
And how long have you worked in law enforcement?
I've been in law enforcement for a total of 14 years next month.
All with the city of Waukesha?
I have about 5 months with the city of Dodgeville Police Department in Wisconsin.
On November 21st, 2021, during a Christmas parade in Waukesha, tragedy struck when 76 people were caught in a horrific incident, leaving over 60 of them fatally injured. The person responsible was none other than Daryl Brooks.
All right. Sir, I'd like to direct your attention to the date of November 21 of 2021, please. Were you working that afternoon?
I was working that afternoon, yes.
What was your duty or assignment?
I was assigned a normal patrol beat, squad area 216 with the city of Waukesha on a 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. shift.
Were you aware there was a parade taking place in downtown Waukesha that afternoon?
I was aware that there was a Christmas parade downtown Waukesha.
Were you directly assigned to work the parade?
I was not assigned to work the parade.
In court, a policeman, Jeremy Phillips, is asked to testify before further hearings can continue, as he was one of the officers who witnessed the incident.
I received a complaint to respond in emergency fashion, which means light and siren, for subjects fighting in the park with a knife allegedly involved.
Where were you coming from?
I was in the patrol area of East Moreland, roughly at East Main Street at the time. That's where I was responding from.
Was Main Street shut down at the time for the parade?
Main Street where I was responding from was not, no.
Okay.
Jeremy claims to have received an emergency call for victims fighting with weapons involved and had been dispatched to the area later that day.
What do you remember seeing?
As I neared the vicinity of White Rock Avenue at Baxter, directly in front of me appeared to be a unmarked patrol vehicle, silver in color, which was blocking the roadway at White Rock Avenue and Hartwell Avenue. And I believe off to the side, I could also see a marked patrol vehicle.
Could you see any floats or people participating in the parade?
At that particular time, as I arrived in the vicinity, I did not. I just saw the side of a squad car with emergency lights activated. It wasn't until a little while later I saw that there were floats and such on the other side of that patrol vehicle.
The silver colored SUV with lights, red and blue lights activated, do you know whose squad car that was?
That belonged to Sergeant Dave Warner.
Where did you go?
When I arrived to the area, initial dispatch information stated that this alleged fight involving a knife was somewhere in the vicinity of the Schutze building where the boat ramp was. Based on my training and experience of that vicinity, I know that the boat rental checkout is on the back side of the Schutze building, so that's the initial area I responded to and where my attention was drawn to.
After he speaks, an exhibit of a map is brought out so the cop can identify the places he claimed to have been through.
I drove around in the parking lot of the Schutze building. There was another officer already on scene who, from my understanding, was already on foot in and around the vicinity of the Schutze building and advised that they could not find anybody at the Schutze building.
Another officer's out on foot? What do you do?
At this point, the officer came over the radio and stated he could not find anybody in the vicinity. I was listening and monitoring the radio, and at some point, what I thought was a reserve officer came over and said that they were speaking with a couple of subjects potentially involved. So at that time, I got on the radio and said I was going to attempt to meet with the caller because I didn't exactly know who this reserve officer was speaking to, how many subjects were involved, if they were actually involved or just a witness to the situation. All of that information was completely unbeknownst to me, so I decided I should probably go meet with a reserve officer and figure out who these subjects are and what the involvement was.
This reserve officer was working as part of the parade, is that right?
He was. He was in the vicinity right at Sergeant Dave Warner's location.
Okay.
The officer claims to have gotten a distress call and, on getting to the location, finds a reserve officer who he doesn't know. He says he tries to meet with the caller to get more information from them instead, as the reserve officer claims to be speaking with those potentially involved.
Before I could fully reach that intersection, there was approximately 3 subjects off to my right-hand side on the sidewalk that were yelling, screaming, and waving, like flagging me down. The way that they were doing this, they appeared to be in distress. They appeared that they needed immediate help, and certainly appeared that they needed to speak with somebody in law enforcement.
So I assume you pulled over.
I pulled over, I rolled down my passenger window, and two of the subjects started yelling that their friend had been assaulted. So it was right at that point that they started trying to tell me that their friend had been assaulted, that information came over the radio on the primary dispatch channel that something had happened downtown and somebody had been hit. So at that point, my attention started to get a little bit diverted, because hearing that on the radio is not something that just happens every day. That perks you up pretty quickly to figure out, that could be a serious injury, that could be more officers needed, something to that effect. So that took my attention away briefly. As I looked back at the subjects, they started to again say that their friend had been assaulted. So I said, hold on, let me pull over so I can get out, so I can speak with you directly in person and figure out what was going on.
Jeremy claims to have met some people who flagged down his vehicle with claims that their friend had been assaulted. Seeing this as a trivial matter, Jeremy stops his vehicle to hear them out. They tell him their friend has been assaulted by a boyfriend. When he meets with the assaulted lady, she tries to downplay it and says it was just a verbal argument, but he can see swelling, bruising, and a black eye on her face. He also tried to investigate further before he got another call from the radio.
The calls on the radio at that point were 1078 after 1078 after 1078.
Okay, what does that mean?
So 1078 in law enforcement jargon is officer needs immediate assistance right now, all available units. As that was being called multiple times, other people were coming on the radio and stating there were subjects down in the street, then it was 10 people down, then it was 15, then it was to 30 or 40. And I had to make a decision at that point, speaking with the subjects, particularly the one who appeared to be involved and the most injured, who was not being cooperative with me, that the greater danger and the clear and present threat that was happening downtown had to draw my attention. I had to leave.
All right. The events that you've described for us so far, are those all captured on your squad video, sir?
Yes.
And at that time, in November of 2021, were you wearing a body camera?
I was not wearing a body camera at that time.
The officer is now left to choose between the case of the lady who was beaten by her boyfriend and is refusing to cooperate and the case just announced on his radio. He chooses the latter.
I leave the area. I tell her I'm sorry that I had to go. I went down White Rock, navigated float traffic, went down East Main Street in a westbound direction, and eventually came to East Main Street at Barstow Street, where I exited my patrol vehicle.
A recording is then played in court as proof that everything said so far is the truth.
When you got to Main Street, where'd you go?
When I got to Main Street, as most of you probably just saw in the video, I took a westbound direction all the way down to Barstow. There's still floats in the parade. I think there was a lot of people that didn't exactly know what was happening in front of them. When I got to Barstow and exited my patrol vehicle and you saw me running down towards the center of the street, at that point I was just trying to assist any officer, EMS, civilian individual that was around, and it was just mass chaos, carnage everywhere.
Did you attempt to render aid to some injured individuals?
There was approximately 2 to 3 individuals I can remember talking to directly. They were all members of the band. I don't know which band it was. It was one of the high school bands. They were in the vicinity just west of Barstow on Main. There was a number of them laying in the street, obviously injured. I had face-to-face contact with a few of them laying on the ground. There were parents screaming at me to help their kids. I did what basic measures that I could take as far as emergency life-saving goes. I checked pulses. I asked them to squeeze my finger, asked them what hurt, what they could move. The 2 or 3 I talked to could still move. They could still talk. They could tell me what hurt. There were multiple people standing around them, also providing aid. At that point, some of the radio traffic that I was picking up on, I was gathering that potentially a vehicle had driven through the parade and hit some of these individuals. I contemplated throwing some of these people in my patrol vehicle and trying to get them to a hospital. However, my vehicle just simply isn't equipped to have that kind of space or room to do that, given the fact that I didn't want to try to move anybody unnecessarily that would have caused further damage to them, especially if somebody's involved in blunt force trauma, such as a car crash.
Jeremy gets to the location of the incident to find multiple people injured. With his police vehicle not having enough space for the injured victims, he has no choice but to wait for an ambulance. In the process of waiting, he learns that a car had driven through the parade and crushed some of the paraders.
The third person I came across was also a band member. She was a female. Her leg was obviously injured. She was being held upright by a couple of adults. And I asked her what was wrong, what was hurting. if there's anything more serious with her as she was being held up. And she said, "Officer, I saw what happened. I saw who did this." And I said, "What can you tell me?" And she said, "A red SUV sped through the parade and did this." She didn't say anything more than that. I said, "Okay." I was like, "Stay with your family, stay with your parents. Somebody will be by with an ambulance to get you shortly." I was made aware a little while after my involvement directly in the downtown area, yes.
Did you learn the name of the person who had been taken into custody?
Yes.
What was that name?
I knew from radio traffic at the time that it was a Daryl Brooks. I didn't know the date of birth or middle name or anything at that point.
At some point later, after the chaos had somewhat settled, did you have an opportunity to go back and try and investigate the initial complaint you had taken from Erica Patterson?
Yes, I did.
Once the case had settled, Jeremy claimed to have returned to the lady who had allegedly been assaulted by her boyfriend and surprisingly found that she's linked to Brooks.
And specifically, could you find anything linking Miss Patterson to the defendant, Daryl Brooks?
Objection. Hearsay.
Overruled.
I did find information through our reporting system and other law enforcement sources to directly link Erica Patterson to Daryl Brooks, yes.
And did that information also directly link Daryl Brooks to a vehicle described as a red SUV?
Yes, it did.
Jeremy is then cross-examined by Daryl Brooks, who makes him look like he's being paid to give testimonies against him.
I noticed, Officer Phillips, you are in uniform this afternoon. Were you scheduled to work today?
Yes.
So it would be fair to say that you would be on duty as of now if you weren't giving testimony in this manner.
I would be on duty right now, yes.
It would also be fair to ask if it would be fair to say that you giving testimony right now, you're still getting paid for it?
I am currently employed by the City of Waukesha Police Department on a working patrol shift, on a normal shift for myself, yes.
Would it be fair to say that you are getting paid right now as we speak?
Mr. Brooks, if you did anything to further investigate the initial fight that you were dispatched to, do you remember that question?
Yes.
Did you, in fact, relay to detectives who were working on this parade incident the information you had found out about the link between Erica Patterson and Daryl Brooks?
Yes.
To your knowledge, did detectives then follow up?
To my knowledge, it's detectives that followed up on any further investigation regarding the fight itself.
This cop was definitely able to save himself, but our next cop clearly isn't.
And Mr. Floyd didn't drop dead while you were interacting with him, correct?
No.
You testified that you were the officer who approached the passenger side of the vehicle. You approached George Floyd on May 6th of 2019, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And you had your gun drawn when you approached Mr. Floyd, isn't that right?
Yes, I pulled it, yes.
And when you approached Mr. Floyd, he said, "Don't shoot me, man, I don't want to get shot," right?
Something like that, yes.
You told him to undo his seatbelt, correct?
That's correct, yes, ma'am.
And he did that, right?
Yes, he did.
George Floyd died on May 25th, 2020, after a white cop, Derek Chauvin, pressed his knee against George's neck. At Derek's trial, the video of Floyd's arrest on May 6, 2019 was brought up. It was said that George was a passenger in an unlicensed vehicle.
And then you said, "Put your hands where I can see them," correct?
Yes.
And then he put his hands in the air?
Yes.
And then you told him to put his hands on the dash, is that right?
That's correct.
And that was when you grabbed his hand and forcibly put it on the dashboard of the vehicle, correct?
Well, yes.
And then the other officer with you on the other side of the vehicle changed that to put your hands on your head, correct?
That's correct.
And then he put his hands on his head, right?
That's correct, yes.
And there was one officer who said that they were going to tase him, right?
That's what I heard, yes.
And you were yelling pretty loud, correct?
Yes, I was, yes. It escalated real quick.
With this officer admitting to visibly coercing Floyd to do as they wish, it is safe to say this incident would amount to what would lead to his death.
Some profanity as well, correct?
Yes.
And you had your gun drawn the whole time you were giving commands, right?
Once I started ordering him and he refused to show me his hands, yes, eventually it escalated where I pulled my gun, yes, ma'am.
And he was awake, correct?
What's that, ma'am?
Mr. Floyd was awake. Was he awake during this incident?
Yes.
He was conscious?
Yes.
He didn't appear to be in medical distress to you when you were pulling him out of the car, is that right? He was talking to you, he was standing up, is that right?
I don't know if it was specifically, sometimes he was talking, sometimes he was mumbling. He was incoherent in my mind a lot of the time during there.
But you got him out of the car and you handcuffed him, right?
That's correct, ma'am.
He asked you not to beat him up, correct?
That's correct, yes.
He was able to walk, right?
Yes, he was.
He continued to talk to you. While you were interacting with Mr. Floyd, he didn't collapse on the ground, correct?
Wait a minute, what was the question? Can you speak up a little louder, ma'am?
While you were interacting with Mr. Floyd, he didn't collapse on the ground, correct?
No, he did not.
Though he claims George was totally fine before and after the arrest, it is still believed that this arrest was what orchestrated his death. This cop and every other cop involved in this case not only get canceled by the public, they also lose their jobs and are currently facing criminal charges. Our next cop definitely tried to run from the law, but the law finally caught up with him. On 2016 at the Tonawanda Town Court in New York, a couple was seen having an argument with Michelle Lewandowski. It is claimed that the couple refused to leave the courtroom even after Officer Michael had told them to. Soon, another officer appears at the scene, and soon, Michael pulls the man forcefully from his seat, leaving the woman alone and watching her husband being dragged outside. Michael then returns and pushes the woman against the door, outside the courtroom. Michael is seen with other officers hitting the man multiple times, with the woman arguing and trying to intervene, but Michael pushes her to the wall, knocking her head. She is then warned by one of the officers to stay back. They are then handcuffed later. After this incident, no charges were filed. Michael was, however, suspended for 10 days for the use of force, but this was later reduced to 5 days. This footage remained hidden until 4 years later when a local TV station presented it as proof of misconduct by the officer. After the video gets released, Michael is then fired from the police department. That cop finally got what he deserved 4 years later, but our next cop definitely got his judgment instantly.
The only way I can make sense of the sentencing, and I also want everyone to understand where I'm coming from with regards to this, especially if there's going to be any appellate review of this sentence.
Michael Dotro, a former Edison police officer, was charged with firebombing his supervisor's home and other retaliations he had orchestrated against those who wronged him.
The sentence to be imposed in this particular case is because Mr. Dotro, through his conduct and his admissions, spanning from 1998 to this year, represents the worst that we could possibly expect from someone in our society. Yes, he's caused very specific damage to Captain Enderko and his family, to Ms. Zog, to Ms. Dotro, to his own parents, to his families, to his brothers. But what he's really done, and what we're going to be left with after he's walking out the door to spend the next third of his life in prison, is allow people a basis to say that our system of justice has no integrity. How could it, when we've allowed this particular individual like him, here in Middlesex County, here in Edison, to do the things that he's done, similar to what we see on the news every day from other parts of the country. Because of what this individual has done, because of him and people like him, victims are afraid to come forward to be part of the criminal justice system and get the relief that they're entitled to from being victimized, because they have no faith in it, because they don't know who to trust.
Dotro is sentenced to 20 years in prison for his misconduct. Before his sentencing, the judge gives a speech on how and why they decided to give Dotro such a sentence, even though he's also a law enforcement officer. He speaks about the law and why he wants victims to have faith in the law once more.
Even more importantly, we have other individuals every day who put on a badge which represents honor, service, and integrity. Without question, go out there every day, leave their family behind to protect an entire community with hopes that they can make it through the day, through the end of their shift, so that they can go back home to their family and lead a normal human being life, because the life of a police officer is not a normal human being life.
Finally, a corrupt sergeant known for abusing his power got handed a fiery verdict that not only ended his career, but lands him behind bars.
Today is that day.
Dirty cops make things a lot worse than they should be, but sometimes they get to face the consequences of their actions. In this video, we will look at cases where dirty cops instantly get killed in the courtroom, starting with the first one, where an angry judge destroyed a cop's whole life. Former Sheriff Jamie Knoll of Clark County grabbed headlines when he was found in contempt of court for violating his bond conditions by possessing multiple firearms in his residence. This controversial figure, famous for his stint on the A&E show 60 Days In, also faced accusations of embezzling millions in local funds for personal gain. The judge's surprising judgment in this case will truly leave you astonished.
I told Mr. Knoll, don't do anything stupid. Do not try to deceive me, defy me. You will not like the consequences. Today is that day. You are not the law. You don't interpret the law. You don't enforce the law. You're not above the law. I find that you are in contempt of this court. Take him into custody.
We need more dedicated judges like him who are passionate about serving the public and standing up for justice. It's time to show corrupt cops that their actions will be punished.
No, that's enough. I'll find you guys in contempt for disrupting the proceedings, and you'll be right there with me. Now, what is an appropriate sanction? The question is, I can sentence him up to 180 days without a trial, or I can sentence him to a day, or I can release him. You know what I think the answer is? 60 days in. That's what I think the answer is today. Before he is released, I'll take your suggestion. I want an independent individual to scour that household to determine that there's no further weapons. I find that Mr. Hurdle's original argument that he was trying to make that I sustained, an officer of the law, every time I go into court, I hear, I didn't know it was there. I didn't know it was there. It really did. You've heard that a million times. You've heard it a million times, and yet you still take them into custody, would be my guess. Every officer in the world has heard, I didn't know it was there, it's my friends. I'm not buying it. It's your burden, it's your responsibility, and today the court will enforce that. Take more.
This is what dirty cops like him deserve, to rot in jail until their demise. Thanks to the judge's fierce decision, people across the states can rest peacefully knowing that we are in good hands. If you think this cop was tough, then watch this next one who thoroughly exposed the criminal cop before giving him a fierce sentence.
Eric DeValconaire on count 1, the Class E felony of involuntary manslaughter in the second degree.
On Friday, March 4th, 2022, former Kansas City police detective Eric DeValconaire, who was convicted in November of Cameron Lamb in Kansas City, Missouri, appeared in front of Judge Dale Youngs. The way the judge hands down the sentence is a sight to behold.
There are a number of facts in this case that are both aggravating and mitigating, sometimes all at the same time. First and foremost is this undeniable and uncontested fact. Cameron Lamb is dead, and Eric DeValconaire killed him. That's undisputed. Cameron Lamb was by all accounts a helpful and loving son, brother, father, and friend. People who have contacted me and who I have heard from today have described him as funny, caring, giving. Miss Gray called him a protector, a jokester, and my favorite of all the ones that I read, not a saint, but our angel. Also, as I'm weighing all these facts, It can't be overlooked that the events of December 3rd of 2019 were initially set into motion by Cameron Lamb and his decision to chase his girlfriend through city streets at dangerously high speeds, putting motorists and other members of the public at risk. However, those events tragically concluded with the actions of Troy Schwam and the defendant. Pulling up to defendant's house, Sergeant Schwam pulling into the driveway, immediately getting out with his weapon drawn, rapidly moving into the backyard, carport, garage area of the house, and defendant doing the same. Both without taking a breath, without pausing for the briefest of moments to consider where they were going, what they would find when they got back there, whether they were acting lawfully in doing so, and whether there might be some other safer option.
Lamb, 26, was backing his pickup truck into his garage when DeValconaire shot several times, and he died.
At any point, Sergeant Schwam and the defendant could have done this, a fact that is made even more aggravating as the court considers an appropriate sentence in this case by the fact that the one person who ultimately did take a breath that morning was Cameron Lamb. He did this when at some point, while he was chasing his girlfriend, he decided to discontinue the chase and to go home. The video from the helicopter shows this decision, shows how it played out. Cameron Lamb is not racing through the streets of his neighborhood at this point. He's not driving through yards to get away from anyone. He does not abandon the truck and let it roll into someone's yard while he flees on foot. Rather, he simply pulls into the driveway of his home, pulls around back, puts the vehicle into reverse, and slowly begins backing it down the driveway, under the carport, and into his garage. And as the court has found, an encounter that was over and a situation that had de-escalated was again escalated by what I have found, rightly or wrongly, was their unlawful entry into the backyard carport area and confrontation of Cameron Lamb. This is an aggravating factor. The circumstances of the offense as described during the trial, however, also provide the court with a mitigating factor. I found, as I've considered the evidence in the case, that the defendant, Eric DeValconaire, testified credibly at trial that he was rushing to provide cover for Sergeant Schwam, who had rushed into the backyard with his weapon drawn, prompting the defendant to do the same from the other side of the house.
DeValconaire said Lamb was armed, but the prosecutors believe that the firearm found near him was placed there intentionally.
Negating his obligation to act with reasonable care, as the court found he has failed to do, his natural reaction to protect his partner is a factor for me to also consider. And let's also be clear, and it is hard to accept this distinction, I know that. Murder and involuntary manslaughter arising from criminal negligence are two different things. They are different legal concepts. They are different things. Eric DeValconaire is not Derek Chauvin, who murdered George Floyd. Eric DeValconaire is not one of the 3 men in Georgia convicted of running down and murdering Ahmaud Arbery. This is a mitigating factor. Defendant has no prior criminal history. His ORAS scores him as a low risk in all categories, as his father asked me to do, which I was already going to do, and that is to consider the totality of the circumstances and to consider the totality of the defendant's life. The facts and the circumstances in the history of defendant's career and his life that have been presented to this court have demonstrated he has not hesitated to immediately take action when he believed the circumstances surrounding him warranted it. And this trait has generally served him and others well. It also failed him, as it did on December 3rd of 2019. All of which, however, leads the court back to where it began, an evaluation of the impact of the defendant's crime on Cameron Lamb and his family.
The judge did a great job of explaining to everyone that he was not biased against the officer. He also mentioned the impact on the deceased family, so both sides felt heard.
And the court has found that that happened because the defendant acted without considering or being aware of the substantial and unjustifiable risks associated with his conduct, and that his actions were a gross deviation from the standard of care that a reasonable person would exercise in the situation. Having concluded, as I have, having considered all those factors, I ask counsel if there's any legal reason or cause having been shown why sentence and judgment of the court should not now be pronounced.
Sir.
Eric DeBalconaire, on count 1, the Class E felony of involuntary manslaughter in the second degree, I sentence you to a term of incarceration in the Missouri Division of Adult Institutions of 3 years. On the unclassified felony of armed criminal action, I sentence you to a term of incarceration of 6 years in the Missouri Department of Corrections. Those cases, or rather those counts and sentences, will run concurrent with one another for a total term of incarceration of 6 years.
DeBalconaire was sentenced to 3 years for the involuntary manslaughter conviction and 6 years for armed action. Although the sentence sounds short, his life after getting out was essentially over. If you think this officer had it bad, then wait till you see this next officer who was being cross-examined for arresting George Floyd.
And Mr. Floyd didn't drop while you were interacting with him, correct?
No.
Derek Chauvin is the officer who previously arrested George Floyd. He was a former Minneapolis police officer involved in Floyd's fatal arrest on May 25, 2020, where he knelt on Floyd's neck for over 9 minutes while Floyd was handcuffed and pleading for air.
Testified that you were the officer who approached the passenger side of the vehicle. You approached George Floyd on May 6th of 2019, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And you had your gun drawn when you approached Mr. Floyd, isn't that right?
Yes, I pulled it, yes.
And when you approached Mr. Floyd, he said, "Don't, man, I don't want to get shot."
Something like that, yes.
You told him to undo his seatbelt, correct?
That's correct, yes, ma'am.
And he did that, right?
Yes, he did.
And then you said, "Put your hands where I can see them," correct?
Yes.
And then he put his hands in the air?
Yes.
And then you told him to put his hands on the dash, is that right?
That's correct.
And that was when you grabbed his hand and forcibly put it on the dashboard of the vehicle, correct?
Fallen, yes.
This incident led to widespread protests and calls for police reform across the United States and globally. Watch how Chauvin's expressions change as he gets cross-checked.
And then he put his hands on his head, right?
That's correct, yes.
And there was one officer who said that they were going to take him, right?
That's what I heard, yes.
And you were yelling pretty loud, correct?
Yes, I was, yes. It escalated real quick.
Some profanity as well, correct?
Yes.
And you had your gun drawn the whole time you were giving commands, right?
Once I started ordering him and he refused to show me his hands, yes, it escalated where I pulled my gun, yes, ma'am.
And he was awake, correct?
What's that, ma'am?
Mr. Floyd was awake. Was he awake during this incident?
Yes.
He was conscious?
Yes.
He didn't appear to be in medical distress to you when you were pulling him out of the car, is that right? He was standing up, is that right?
I don't know if it was specifically, sometimes he was talking, sometimes he was mumbling. He was incoherent in my mind a lot of the time during there.
But you got him out of the car and you handcuffed him, right?
That's correct, ma'am.
And he stood next to the car, right?
Yes, ma'am.
He asked you not to beat him up, correct?
That's correct, yes.
He was able to walk, right?
Yes, he was.
He continued to talk to you. While you were interacting with Mr. Floyd, he didn't collapse on the ground, correct?
Wait a minute, what was the question? Can you speak up a little louder, ma'am?
While you were interacting with Mr. Floyd, he didn't collapse on the ground, correct?
No, he did not.
Well, the answer is stricken. The objection is sustained.
Your attention was focused on Mr. Floyd, correct?
Yes, it was.
And Mr. Floyd didn't drop while you were interacting with him, correct?
No.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Chauvin was charged with multiple offenses, including second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. He was convicted on all counts in April 20th, 21, and subsequently sentenced to 22.5 years in prison for his role in Floyd's death. Next up, we have the case of an ex-cop who was involved in one of the most heinous things an officer could do.
Verdict reads, we the jury, having found the defendant Aaron York Dean guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of the offense of manslaughter.
In October 20th, 19, former Fort Worth police officer Aaron Dean appeared in front of a Texas jury for fatally shooting Tatiana Jefferson in October 20th, 19. His guilty verdict was a rare conviction of an officer for killing someone who was also armed.
Good afternoon. The jury has sent a note or given me notice that they have reached a verdict. Are both sides ready to receive the verdict?
State's ready, Your Honor. The defense is ready, Judge.
All right. Y'all did fabulous when we did the guilt-innocence verdict, okay? Same rules apply. I don't know what this verdict is. Can't have any emotions, all right? Let's bring them in. Good afternoon. Juror number one, it's my understanding the jury has reached a verdict. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is it a unanimous verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. If you hand it please to Deputy Nicholson. Mr. Dean. Verdict reads, we the jury, having found the defendant Aaron York Dean guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of the offense of manslaughter, assess his punishment at confinement in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for 11 years, 10 months, 12 days. They do not assess a fine. And it is signed by the presiding juror. You may be seated. Thank you very much. Members of the jury, as we went through before, I'm going to call your juror number and ask you if this verdict is your individual verdict.
Notice how the devil cop failed to show any emotions. It's as if he didn't want anyone to see that they could get to him.
Number 6, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 9, is this your verdict? Juror number 14, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 15, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 21, is this your verdict? Juror number 31, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 32, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 37, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 38, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Your verdict will be received and filed. Thank you very much. Mr. Gill, Mr. Brissett, is there any legal reason why sentence should not be pronounced?
No legal reason.
Mr. Dean, it's the jury having found you guilty of the offense of manslaughter and assessed this punishment. It's the order of the court you be remanded to the custody of the sheriff, be delivered to the director of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice from the date of your original arrest up until today, which would be the date of sentence. You have the right to appeal the jury's decision. You do so by giving written notice of appeal to the Second Court of Appeals here in Fort Worth within 30 days. If you are indigent and cannot afford a lawyer, I would conduct an indigency hearing to determine if you are indigent. And if you are indigent, I would appoint a lawyer to represent you on appeal and provide you a record of this appeal of this trial at no cost. Mr. Gill, Mr. Brissett, if y'all will remain on his case pending his decision whether he wishes to appeal, and if you'll furnish the information for the trial court certification of appeal before you leave here today, I would appreciate it. Is there an allocution? You may be seated. Thank you very much.
The jury took about 13 hours to reach a decision and ended up finding Dean guilty of manslaughter instead of the more serious charge the prosecutors wanted. Dean's defense argued that his actions were reasonable given the circumstances, but the jury went with the lesser charge in the end. Do you think the jury made the right decision? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked the video, subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one we have in store for you. Thanks for watching. This is Detective Mystery, signing off.